Humble waitress mistakes the orders without knowing that one of the customers is a millionaire. He falls in love and is left speechless soon after she surprises him with what she knows how to do alone with him. You can't miss the end of this story. Subscribe to the channel and comment on what date you are watching this video and come with us. The door of the small restaurant opened with a tinkling of bells, letting in a gust of fresh air and the distant murmur of the city. The place was modest but cozy, with its walls covered in aged wood and simple tables occupied by customers looking for a home-cooked meal after a long day of work. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the aroma of baked bread, creating a warm and familiar atmosphere. Abigail hurriedly slid between the tables, balancing a tray with 2 steaming cups and a plate of apple pie. Her light blue uniform was a little wrinkled, and a strand of hair stubbornly tried to escape from the bun she was attempting to keep secure. Despite the exhaustion etched on her face, her brown eyes still carried a glimmer of determination. She had been working at that restaurant for 2.5 years, dividing her hours between serving tables and helping in the kitchen when necessary. The salary was modest, but enough to help her mother and her younger sister Emily, who was still in high school. That night, the restaurant was busier than usual. The owner, a friendly old man named Caleb, tried to keep up with the orders while the only other waitress on the shift, Ava, rushed back and forth with a notepad in hand. "Abigail, table 7. Caleb called out, pointing to one of the tables near the window. She nodded quickly, grabbing the newly prepared order and walking over. 2 well-dressed men were seated, speaking in low voices. One of them gestured enthusiastically, while the other listened with a half smile on his lips, absently swirling a glass of wine between his fingers. "Here's your order," Abigail said, carefully placing the dishes on the table. The man, who seemed more talkative, looked at the food and frowned. "This isn't what I ordered. I ordered the shrimp risotto, and this is filet mignon with Madeira sauce." Abigail blinked, confused. She looked at the other man, who was still swirling his glass, watching her with an inscrutable gaze. "I'm sorry, sir. I must have mixed up the orders. I will correct this immediately." Before she could take the plates back, the other man finally spoke. "No need." His voice was calm but firm. "Actually, I think I'll try the filet today." Abigail raised her eyes to him, surprised. There was something in his expression that unsettled her. He didn't seem bothered by the mistake. On the contrary, he looked slightly amused. "Are you sure, sir?" she asked, still hesitant. He nodded. "I am indeed, and you don't need to call me sir. My name is Daniel." His friend scoffed, picking up the fork with a skeptical expression. "Are you always like this, accepting whatever they throw in front of you?" Daniel shrugged. "Sometimes mistakes lead us to unexpected discoveries." Abigail smiled shyly and stepped back, returning to the counter with the feeling that something strange had just happened. Daniel seemed different from the regular customers of the restaurant. Not only had he accepted the mistake, but he also seemed genuinely intrigued by her. While clearing some empty plates from another table, she noticed that Daniel was still discreetly watching her. She felt a light blush rise to her cheeks, but pushed the thought away and continued with her work. When it was time to settle the bill, she approached the table to deliver the check. Daniel placed a card on the table, but before she could take it, he slid a folded bill to her side. "For you," he said, with a discreet smile. Abigail frowned and picked up the bill. Her heart raced as she saw the amount. It was a tip far above what any customer usually gave there. This is too much," she started, but Daniel just raised his hand, interrupting her. "Consider it a thank you for the lovely dinner." Saying this, he stood up, gave a slight nod, and left with his friend, disappearing into the bustling night of the city. Abigail stood still for a few seconds, looking at the bill in her hand. Something in her told her that this was not just a simple tip. There was something more behind that gesture. That night when she got home, Abigail couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. She had never seen a customer like him, and that look, there was something in it that made her wonder who he really was. Driven by curiosity, she grabbed her phone and typed Daniel Construction into the search engine. The results appeared instantly. Her heart skipped a beat when she recognized Daniel's photo in one of the headlines. Daniel, the visionary businessman, behind the country's largest luxury constructions. Abigail widened her eyes. She had served dinner to a millionaire, and he hadn't even mentioned it. She dropped her phone on the bed, her mind racing with questions. Daniel seemed different from the powerful men she saw in the news. He didn't act arrogantly, nor look down on others. On the contrary, there was something genuine about him, something that intrigued her more than she was willing to admit. For no reason, Abigail felt a flutter in her stomach. Something told her that this meeting had not been just a coincidence, and she was about to find out why. The restaurant was already closing when Abigail finally hung up her apron and said goodbye to Daniel and Ava. Her mind was still stuck on that strange encounter with Daniel. His calm demeanor, the look in his eyes that seemed to see beyond what others saw, and that absurd tip. When she got home, her mother Hannah was watching a soap opera on the small television in the living room, while Emily finished a school assignment at the table. The apartment was simple but cozy, decorated with antique furniture and family photos hung on the wall. "You're late today, daughter," Hannah commented, giving her a tired look. The restaurant was full, Abigail replied, kissing her mother's cheek before heading to the kitchen to drink a glass of water. "Was it a good day?" Emily asked, not taking her eyes off her notebook. Abigail hesitated for a moment, remembering Daniel. How he accepted the wrong dish without complaining, the way he looked at her before leaving. And of course, the surreal tip. It was different. Emily raised an eyebrow, finally looking away from her notebook to her sister. Different how? Abigail sighed and sat down next to her, grabbing her phone. "Today, a guy left this as a tip for me," she said, showing the picture of the bill she took before putting it away. Emily's eyes widened. "What? You're kidding, right?" Hannah, who was about to change the channel, turned to look. "Abigail, where did all that money come from?" "From a customer." "But it wasn't just that. He was different, Mom. He wasn't one of those arrogant guys who come around once in a while. He accepted my mistake without complaining. And he seemed interested in talking to me." Hannah frowned. "Abigail, you know men like that don't usually give away money without second intentions." "But he didn't ask for anything in return," Abigail protested, feeling her face heat up. "Even so, be careful." Abigail nodded, but deep down she knew that Daniel didn't seem to be that type of man. Something in her said he didn't see her just as any waitress. Curiosity kept her awake. After quickly researching online, she stared at Daniel's photos for long minutes. He owned one of the biggest construction companies in the country, with million-dollar contracts spread across various places. He was always at important events, surrounded by businessmen and sophisticated women. So why had he been so kind to her? The next morning, Abigail returned to the restaurant for another day of work, still thinking about Daniel. She tried to push the thoughts away, focusing on the customers and the orders. But something inside her insisted that this story wasn't over yet. And she was right. It was past noon when the restaurant door opened again, and Abigail felt a strange shiver run down her spine. Daniel entered. He was alone this time, wearing a perfectly tailored dark blue suit, but without the pretentious air that other rich men usually had. His eyes scanned the room quickly before finding hers. A slight smile formed on his face, and Abigail had to force herself to breathe deeply before approaching. "Daniel," she said, surprised. "I didn't expect to see you again." "Let's just say I felt like trying another order mistake," he joked, resting his arms on the table. Abigail laughed, feeling a bit more relaxed. "I'll try not to mess up this time." And what if I want you to mess up again? She blinked, unsure how to respond. Daniel watched her with a playful glint in his eyes, as if he enjoyed challenging her. So, what do you want today? What do you recommend? He asked, leaning slightly forward. Abigail crossed her arms and thought for a moment. Jorge's lasagna is good, but if you want something lighter, the grilled chicken with salad is also a great option. Lasagna then. Drink? Surprise me. She smiled and took note of the order before stepping away. Her heart was beating faster than normal, and she couldn't ignore Daniel's presence there. When she returned with the food and drink, he waited for her to take a few steps back before speaking. Did you know who I was before last night? Abigail swallowed hard. No, but I researched afterward. And what did you think? She hesitated before responding. I thought you didn't match what the articles say. You seem different. Daniel raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Different how? Abigail bit her lower lip, choosing her words carefully. More approachable, more real. Daniel was silent for a moment, analyzing her. Then he smiled. Most people see me as just a number, as money. You don't. She felt herself blush. I don't see anyone like that. Daniel picked up his fork and tasted the lasagna. Excellent choice. You have good taste. Of course I do. I work here, remember? He laughed. When he finished the meal, Daniel did something unexpected. He took out a small black card and handed it to Abigail. There's going to be a charity dinner tomorrow night. I would like you to come with me. Abigail's eyes widened. What? You intrigued me, Abigail. I want to get to know you better. She looked at the card, unsure what to say. Part of her screamed that this was crazy, but another part wanted to see how far this story would take her. I don't know if that's a good idea, she murmured. Daniel tilted his head. Why? Because I don't belong to this world. I wouldn't know how to act. He held her gaze intensely. I don't want you to act differently. I want you to be exactly as you are. Abigail felt her heart race. She took a deep breath before looking at the card one more time. And in that moment, she knew she wouldn't be able to say no. Abigail spent the rest of the day with a restless mind, the black card burning in her hands as if it were an invitation to another universe. And in a way, it was. A charity dinner with Daniel. She could hardly imagine what it would be like to be surrounded by rich people, stunning dresses, and sophisticated conversations that certainly did not belong to her daily life. At the end of her shift back home, she sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the small piece of paper on the bedspread. Her mother and Emily were sleeping in the next room, but Abigail was restless. She grabbed her phone, typed the event's name into the internet, and was left speechless at the level of the reception. The dinner would take place in one of the city's most luxurious event halls, with the presence of politicians, businessmen, and celebrities. What am I doing? She murmured to herself, dropping the phone on the bed and running her hands over her face. The truth was that a part of her wanted to accept the invitation. She wanted to find out why Daniel invited her and understand what was behind that unexpected interest. But the fear of not fitting in, of being seen as an intruder, was too great. The next morning, Abigail still hadn't made a decision. The day at the restaurant dragged on, every order taken being interrupted by thoughts about the dinner. When Daniel showed up again, just before the end of the afternoon, Abigail felt her stomach flip. He wasn't wearing a suit this time. He wore dark jeans and a blue dress shirt rolled up to the elbows, even without the formality of the previous day. He still exuded that presence that made everyone around notice his arrival without him having to say a word. This time he didn't choose a table. He went straight to the counter where Abigail was counting change for a customer. As soon as she finished, Daniel leaned his arms on the wooden surface and watched her with an intrigued look. You didn't. He called to confirm. Abigail swallowed hard. I still don't know if I should go. Daniel tilted his head. Why? She let out a sigh. I don't belong to this world, Daniel. People like me don't go to this kind of event. He frowned and leaned in slightly. People like you, what does that mean? It means I don't know anything about expensive wines, that I've never worn a ball gown, and that I'm probably going to say something wrong in front of your millionaire friends. Daniel chuckled softly, but his gaze was full of tenderness. I don't want you to go to impress anyone, Abigail. I want you to go because I like the way you see the world, and because I want to spend that night by your side. Abigail felt her heart race. Daniel spoke so naturally that it almost made it seem simple when clearly it wasn't. I don't even have clothes for an event like that. Daniel smiled, as if he had expected that answer. Then let me help. No! Abigail was quick to respond, shaking her head. I won't accept that kind of thing. If I go, I'll wear something of my own. Daniel seemed to consider her words for a moment and then nodded. Fair enough. He put his hands in his pockets and took a step back. So, are you going? Abigail bit her lower lip. There was something about him that made it impossible to say no. I will. Daniel smiled, satisfied, and left, leaving her with a mix of excitement and nervousness. That night, Abigail rummaged through her small wardrobe, looking for something appropriate, but, as she already expected, found nothing suitable for such a luxurious event. The next day, she used part of her savings to buy a simple but elegant wine-colored dress. It wasn't extravagant, but it was the best she could afford. When the night of the dinner arrived, Abigail was a whirlwind of emotions. Her mother and Emily watched her as she got ready. You look beautiful, Emily said, smiling. She really does, Hannah agreed, but her eyes carried an evident concern. Just promise me you'll be careful, dear. Abigail smiled and squeezed her mother's hand. I promise. Shortly after, a luxurious black car stopped in front of the modest building where Abigail lived. When she stepped out, she saw Daniel getting out of the car to open the door for her. He looked her up and down, and Abigail felt her cheeks heat up. What's wrong? She asked, uncomfortable. You look stunning, he said simply, with a genuine smile. Abigail looked away and got into the car, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach. The ride was silent at first. Abigail was absorbing everything: the comfortable car, Daniel's sophisticated perfume, the fact that she was actually going to a high society event by his side. Nervous? Daniel asked, noticing her silence. She let out a nervous laugh. That's an understatement. Daniel smiled to himself. If it's any consolation, you don't have to worry about anything. Just stay by my side. Abigail looked at him. Why me? Daniel kept his eyes on the road for a moment before responding. Because you're different from anyone I've ever met. She felt a shiver run down her spine. A few minutes later, the car parked in front of the event venue, a majestic building illuminated by golden lights. Outside, dozens of photographers waited eagerly to capture the arrivals of the guests. Abigail took a deep breath, feeling panic rise within her. I can't do this. Daniel held her hand firmly, intertwining his fingers with hers. Yes, you can. I'm with you. Abigail's heart raced at that gesture. She took a deep breath, and when Daniel opened the car door and offered his hand to help her out, she accepted it. As soon as they stepped onto the red carpet, flashes exploded around them. Whispers arose among the photographers. Abigail knew at that moment that her presence alongside Daniel would not go unnoticed, and this was just the first of many challenges she would face that night. Abigail felt the eyes on her as soon as she stepped into the luxurious event hall. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, illuminating the elegantly arranged tables with shining glasses and silver cutlery. Men in impeccable suits conversed in groups, while women in sophisticated dresses glided through the space with champagne glasses in hand. She swallowed hard. The feeling of not belonging to that place enveloped her like a weight on her shoulders. She tried to control the urge to shrink, but her stiff posture betrayed her discomfort. Daniel by her side seemed completely at ease. He walked confidently, greeting acquaintances with a slight nod. Every now and then, his gaze would turn to Abigail, as if he wanted to make sure she was okay. Breathe, he murmured quietly, gently squeezing her hand. Abigail hadn't realized she was holding her breath. She inhaled deeply and slowly exhaled, trying to calm herself. Daniel led her to one of the waiters circulating with trays of drinks. "Champagne?" "Water, please," Abigail answered quickly, and Daniel gave a small smile before grabbing a glass for her. They were still standing there when a tall, graying man approached. His gray suit was impeccable, and his sharp eyes analyzed Abigail with obvious curiosity before turning to Daniel. "You finally arrived, Daniel. We've been waiting for you," he said with a firm handshake. "Good evening, Liam," Daniel replied in a polite but restrained tone. Liam. Abigail vaguely remembered seeing him in one of the articles she read about Daniel. He was part of the board of directors of the construction company and was one of the most influential investors in the real estate sector. Liam's gaze returned to her. "And this beautiful young lady is—" Daniel gently placed his hand on Abigail's waist. "Abigail, my special guest tonight." The word special made Abigail's heart leap involuntarily. Liam raised an eyebrow and forced a smile. "Oh, how interesting." The tone of voice said otherwise. Abigail noticed it, and so did Daniel. He held Liam's gaze for a moment, and something silent passed between them, like a veiled warning. Liam soon said goodbye and walked away, but Abigail had already noticed that some people around were whispering and casting discreet glances in her direction. "What was that?" she asked in a low tone. Daniel shook his head, as if to tell her not to worry. "Nothing for you to be concerned about." But she was concerned. And it wasn't just Liam. There were looks of curiosity, others of judgment, and some that seemed silently to question what she was doing there. As if reading her thoughts, Daniel leaned in to speak in her ear. "Don't let them make you feel lesser. They know nothing about you." She nodded slightly, but still felt the discomfort weighing on her chest. The night continued with speeches and presentations about the charitable projects that would be funded by the event. Abigail tried hard to pay attention, but her mind remained restless. It was then that Daniel did something unexpected. He leaned in again and whispered, "Let's get out of here for a moment." Abigail blinked, surprised. "What?" He smiled to the side and gently took her hand. "Trust me." Without giving her a chance to protest, Daniel discreetly led her out of the main hall. They passed through an elegant corridor until they reached a wide balcony where the city shone under the moonlight. The cool breeze hit Abigail's face, bringing immediate relief. "Better?" Daniel asked, leaning against the railing. Abigail sighed, feeling the tension ease. "Yes, I needed to breathe." Daniel smiled, crossing his arms. "I figured as much. I saw how tense you were in there." She looked at him. "How do you deal with it, with these people analyzing you all the time?" Daniel shrugged. "I've gotten used to it, but it hasn't always been easy. Some of these people think money defines character. I prefer to believe that actions do." Abigail was silent for a moment, absorbing his words. "I don't think I've ever felt so out of place anywhere." Daniel watched her closely. "I know, but I want you to know that for me, your presence here means a lot." Abigail stared at him. There was something sincere in the way he said that. "Why?" Daniel hesitated for a moment, as if choosing the right words. "Because you are real. You're not here for personal gain. You want nothing from me but a sincere conversation." Abigail looked away, feeling her heart race. "I still don't understand what you want from me, Daniel." He smiled, but there was something different in his expression now. "I'm trying to understand too, but I know I don't want this to end today." Abigail's eyes met his, and for a moment everything seemed to slow down. The distant noise of the party, the flashes from the photographers, the judging glances, none of it mattered there. The wind blew stronger, causing a strand of hair to escape from Abigail's hairstyle. Before she could fix it, Daniel raised his hand and gently tucked the strand behind her ear. It was a simple touch, but filled with something that made Abigail hold her breath. "Shall we go back?" Daniel asked, his voice slightly hoarse. She nodded, still feeling the warmth of his touch on her skin. When they re-entered the hall, something inside Abigail had changed. She still didn't know what it was, but she knew that somehow Daniel was already breaking down all the barriers she had tried to put up between them. When Abigail and Daniel returned to the hall, the atmosphere felt even more suffocating than before. Dinner was already being served, and the guests were settling into their finely decorated tables. Silverware clinked against porcelain plates, and crystal glasses were raised in discreet toasts amidst restrained laughter. Daniel guided her naturally to the table where they would sit. Abigail noticed they were seated next to influential people. Businessmen, investors, and socialites who seemed to belong to a world completely different from her own. She tried not to show her nerves as she sat next to Daniel, but she felt the curious gazes piercing her skin. "Are you okay?" Daniel asked in a low tone, leaning slightly closer so only she could hear. Abigail nodded, forcing a smile. "Yes." Daniel narrowed his eyes, suspicious, but did not insist. Soon dinner began to be served, and Abigail focused on the plate in front of her. She tried to follow the conversations around, but the topics revolved around million-dollar investments, strategic partnerships, and international trips, subjects completely alien to her reality. "Daniel, you need to tell me about your new acquisition in the hotel sector," one of the men at the table exclaimed excitedly. "I heard the negotiation was discreet." Daniel gave a slight smile and took a sip of wine before responding. "We are still finalizing the details, but soon I'll have news." Abigail pretended to be focused on her food, but she felt invisible. No one there addressed her, and when her eyes met someone else's, the gazes were always the same: curiosity, condescension, or judgment. It was then that a feminine voice, laced with venom, echoed from across the table. "Abigail, right?" She looked up and saw a blonde woman in a deep red dress watching her with a false smile. It was Charlotte, Daniel's ex-girlfriend. Abigail had seen her in photos in the articles she had read. "Yes," Abigail replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Charlotte tilted her head slightly, as if analyzing her. "And tell me, Abigail, how did you and Daniel meet?" The tone was subtly malicious, but Abigail perceived the intent behind the question. Other people at the table also seemed interested in the answer, and an awkward silence settled in. Daniel furrowed his brow, already sensing where the conversation was going, but before he could intervene, Abigail answered, "At the restaurant where I work." Charlotte's smile widened slightly, pleased with the answer. "How interesting. So you're a waitress?" Abigail felt the blood rush to her face. Not because she was a waitress, she had never been ashamed of that, but because of the tone Charlotte used. "Yes, I am," she replied, keeping her voice neutral. Charlotte chuckled softly and took a sip of champagne before continuing. "Daniel has always had a peculiar taste for surprises, hasn't he?" she said, looking directly at him. Daniel laid his utensils down on the plate and stared at Charlotte coldly. "What do you mean by that, Charlotte?" She gave an innocent smile. "Nothing much. I'm just saying it's curious. After all, you've always attended events with women from our circle, lawyers, journalists, businesswomen, but this time You decided to innovate. Abigail's heart raced, but she remained silent. Daniel could not contain himself. Since when does someone's job define their worth? The silence at the table grew even thicker. Charlotte raised her eyebrows but kept her cold smile. Oh, of course not. I just meant that her universe is very different from yours, Daniel. I hope she's prepared for that. Abigail felt a knot form in her throat. She knew this was not just an observation. It was a warning. She looked around and noticed that other people seemed to agree with Charlotte. Even those who said nothing maintained neutral expressions, as if they were just waiting to see how this would end. Daniel held Abigail's hand under the table, squeezing it lightly. Abigail is much more than you all imagine, and if someone here can't see that, the problem isn't with her. Charlotte smiled smugly, but did not say anything else. Abigail forced a small smile for Daniel, but inside she felt like crumbling. The night continued, but Abigail could no longer feel comfortable. Every laugh at the table seemed laden with irony. Every look was a reminder that she did not belong there. When dinner ended and the guests began to disperse, Abigail stood up. I need a bit of air, she said to Daniel, trying to sound casual. He watched her for a moment, as if he knew something was wrong, but nodded. Abigail left the hall and walked down the corridor to one of the more secluded lounges. She leaned against one of the columns and took a deep breath, trying to control the avalanche of emotions that overwhelmed her. She had never felt so small. As much as Daniel tried to protect her, the truth was clear. His world was not for her. Abigail. She closed her eyes for a second before turning around. Daniel was there, looking at her with concern. I knew this wouldn't work, she whispered. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? She crossed her arms, trying to hold back the pain in her voice. I saw how everyone looked at me, Daniel, how they judged me. I'm not like them. I'll never be. Daniel took a step forward. I don't want you to be like them. I want you as you are. Abigail looked away. Oh, but that isn't enough, is it? His silence spoke more than any words. She felt her heart tighten. I think it's better if I go. Abigail. She didn't wait. She simply turned her back and walked down the corridor, fighting against the tears that threatened to fall. Daniel stood there watching her leave, unable to react. For the first time, he realized he could actually lose her. Abigail left the building feeling a tightness in her chest, a heavy heart, and burning eyes. From the effort to hold back the tears, the night was cold, but she didn't even feel the icy wind against her skin. Her mind was clouded, replaying the judgmental looks, Charlotte's words, and the overwhelming sensation that she would never fit into that world. She shouldn't have come. The sound of hurried footsteps behind her made her heart race. She didn't even need to turn around to know who it was. Abigail. Daniel's voice carried a mix of urgency and frustration. He quickly appeared at her side, gently pulling her by the arm to make her stop. Let me go, Daniel. Her voice came out weaker than she wished. He let out a sigh and ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. No, I'm not going to let you go like this. Abigail finally lifted her gaze to him. And why not? Because you don't want me to ruin your perfect night. Because you don't want people to see that the waitress you brought to dinner couldn't handle the pressure. Abigail, for God's sake, that's not it. Daniel ran his hands through his hair, taking a deep breath before continuing. I brought you because I wanted to be with you, but I never imagined they would treat you like that. Abigail laughed humorlessly. Seriously, because I was already expecting it. People like Charlotte love to make it clear that there is a limit between the theirs and the ours. Daniel clenched his fists, his jaw tense. I hate that they made you feel that way. But they did, and there's nothing you can do to change that. Daniel was silent for a moment. Then, in an unexpected gesture, he took her hand. Come with me. Abigail hesitated. Daniel, I just want to go home." He looked her in the eyes, and this time his voice came out softer, almost a whisper. "Trust me." She didn't know why, but she nodded. Daniel guided her back into the building, but instead of returning to the dining hall, they went up an exclusive elevator to the top floor. When the doors opened, Abigail gasped at the sight of a stunning terrace with a panoramic view of the city. Bright lights stretched as far as the eye could see, and the muted sounds of traffic blended with the night breeze. "What are we doing here?" she asked, still processing the beauty of the place. Daniel took off his jacket and placed it over her shoulders, shielding her from the cold. "You wanted to escape that world, so I brought you to a place just for us." Abigail tightened the warm fabric around herself, surprised by the delicacy of the gesture. Daniel walked to a small, open space in the center of the terrace, where a discreet sound system played a soft melody, almost imperceptible. He extended his hand to her. "Dance with me." Abigail blinked, surprised. "What? Just dance? No looks, no judgments, just us two?" She hesitated for a moment, but then looked at him, at the eyes that always stared at her with such intensity, making her feel that maybe, just maybe, she didn't feel so out of place beside him. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. Daniel gently pulled her closer. His arms wrapped around her waist naturally, and she felt the warmth of his body against hers. Abigail's heart was racing, but this time it wasn't fear. It was something else, something much more dangerous. Daniel guided her slowly, moving to the rhythm of the music. His eyes were fixed on hers, and the world around them seemed to disappear. "You are amazing, Abigail," he said in a low tone. She let out a nervous laugh. "Do you really think that after what happened down there?" He smiled slightly. "I do, because despite everything, you were yourself. You didn't try to fit into something you're not." Abigail looked away, biting her lip. "I will never fit in." Daniel lifted his hand and gently touched her chin, making her look at him. "And who said you have to?" The intensity of that moment made Abigail feel her heart hammering against her chest. Their faces were close, so close that she could feel his breath against her skin. Daniel leaned in a little more. Abigail held her breath. Then he stopped. His eyes traced her face as if seeking silent permission. Abigail didn't know what compelled her, but she closed her eyes and moved close enough to feel the heat of his. Lips against hers. Daniel didn't wait any longer. The kiss started soft, almost hesitant, but quickly deepened, as if they were both holding on to that moment for too long. His arms tightened around her body, and Abigail's hands slid down the back of his neck, feeling the warm touch of his skin. It was intense, it was overwhelming, and it was real. When they pulled away, Daniel kept his forehead against hers, his fingers still tracing circles on her waist. "I wanted to do this since the first time I saw you," he confessed, his voice husky and low. Abigail felt a shiver run down her skin. "I don't know what we're doing, Daniel." He smiled slightly. "I don't either, but I know I want to keep going." Abigail looked at him, and for the first time that night she didn't feel fear. Maybe, just maybe, she wanted to keep going too. The way back home was silent. Abigail was looking out of Daniel's car window, watching the city lights blur by as her mind still tried to process everything that had happened that night. She had kissed Daniel. And more than that, she had felt something intense and overwhelming, something she had never experienced before. The way he held her, how he looked at her right after the kiss, as if he was sure he wanted to continue that. It all left her completely bewildered, but the other side of her mind was screaming. Daniel came from a different world, and that night was the greatest proof of that. She saw the judging looks, heard the disguised comments, and felt in her skin what it was like to be out of place. Could she really allow herself to live something with him without getting hurt in the end? Daniel broke the silence. "What are you thinking about?" Abigail turned her face to him, hesitant. About everything. He smiled softly. Could you be more specific? She bit her lip, unsure if she should say what was really going through her mind. I think that... She started, but her voice faltered. She took a deep breath and tried again. I think that night made it clear how different we are, Daniel. His expression changed subtly, as if he was already expecting those words, but still didn't like hearing them. Abigail. I saw how they looked at me. I saw how Charlotte talked to me. As if I were a passing joke, something that has no place in your world. Daniel tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Do you really think I care about what they think? Abigail looked away. It's not just about you. It's about me too. I need to be honest with myself. Daniel took a deep breath before responding. And what does that mean? She closed her eyes for a moment before facing him. It means I don't know if I can handle this. A heavy silence settled in the car. When they arrived at the simple building where Abigail lived, Daniel parked but didn't turn off the engine. The low sound of the radio filled the space between them. Are you telling me you want to give up on us? He asked, his voice lower, more restrained. Abigail felt her chest tighten. I'm saying I'm scared. Daniel ran his hand through, his hair clearly frustrated. I would never do anything to hurt you, Abigail. I know that, she replied quickly. The problem isn't you, it's what comes with it. Your world, it can hurt me. He remained silent for a moment, his eyes fixed on the windshield. I can protect you. Abigail smiled, but it was a sad smile. Some things can't be protected, Daniel. She opened the car door before he could say anything else. Good night, Daniel. He watched her leave, his heart heavy in his chest. But he knew this conversation wasn't over yet. And he wasn't going to give up on her that easily. The following days were a silent torture for Abigail. She tried to focus on work, follow her routine as if nothing had changed, but everything felt different. The memory of Daniel's kiss still burned in her mind. The warmth of his hands on her skin was almost palpable, and the words he said in the car echoed like a constant whisper. She wanted to forget him. But how do you forget someone who makes you feel alive for the first time? Emily noticed her sister's silence, and during a quiet breakfast at home, decided to ask. You and Daniel had a fight? Abigail looked away from her coffee cup and sighed. Not exactly, Emily squinted her eyes. So what happened? I am trying to distance myself. Her younger sister made a face. And why? Abigail rubbed her face with her hands, exhausted. Because I know this will only end up hurting me. Emily crossed her arms. Or it could end up being the best thing in your life. Abigail laughed humorlessly. You've been watching too many soap operas, but deep down, Emily's words made her think. Later that day, while cleaning one of the tables at the restaurant, she felt a strong presence behind her. The woody perfume, the striking energy. Her heart raced before she even turned around. Daniel was there. She slowly lifted her eyes, meeting his intense gaze. He looked different. He was wearing casual clothes, jeans and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. But the seriousness on his face indicated he wasn't there just for any dinner. Can we talk? He asked straightforward. His tone was firm but not rude. There was a silent request there. Abigail looked around. The restaurant was quiet. Caleb was serving a couple at the entrance, and Ava was organizing the orders. At the counter, there was no excuse to run away. Okay, she said, placing the cleaning cloth on the table and taking a deep breath. Daniel nodded towards the door with his head. Let's take a walk. She hesitated for a moment, but nodded. As soon as they left the restaurant and started walking down the street illuminated by the antique lampposts, Daniel broke the silence. "You've been avoiding me for the past few days." "I needed some time," Abigail replied without looking. At him, Daniel nodded slowly. "And now?" She sighed. "I still don't know." Daniel stopped walking, forcing her to stop as well. "Then let me help you figure it out." Before Abigail could process what he meant, Daniel held her face with both hands and kissed her. This time, there was no hesitation. The kiss was deep, hot, filled with desire. Abigail felt her knees weaken, her body instinctively reacting to his touch. His hands slid down her waist, pulling her closer, and a shiver ran down her spine as she felt the firmness of his body against hers. She should pull away, but instead, she surrendered. Her hands glided down his chest to his shoulders, and she responded to the kiss with the same intensity. The world around them disappeared. There was no restaurant, no judging eyes, no class differences. There was only the warmth of his lips on hers and the way he held her, as if she were the only thing that mattered. When they finally broke apart, Daniel kept his forehead pressed against hers, eyes closed, as if he were holding on. "Tell me you feel this too," he whispered. Abigail swallowed hard, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "I do." Daniel opened his eyes and held her face more gently now, his thumbs caressing her skin. "So why are you running away?" Abigail closed her eyes for a moment before whispering, "Because I'm scared." Daniel gently brushed his thumb over her lower lip. "I'm scared too." She opened her eyes, surprised. "You?" He smiled slightly. "I usually don't lose control over things. But with you, nothing feels right, and yet everything feels perfect." Abigail felt her heart tighten. Daniel intertwined his fingers with hers. "Give me a chance." She looked at him for a moment, feeling the weight of that decision. And then, finally, she gave in. "Okay." Daniel smiled before pulling her in for another kiss, this time without any fears. In the following days, Abigail felt immersed in a whirlwind of emotions. Since that night, Daniel had no longer tried to hide what he felt, and she found herself thinking about him more than she would like to admit. He would send good morning messages, show up at the restaurant to pick her up after work, and whenever they were together, he made a point of touching her subtly, a brush of fingers against her hand, an unexpected hug, or a stolen kiss amidst laughter. And she was allowing herself to feel, but deep down there was still fear. She saw how people looked at them when they walked together. She knew Daniel was used to those looks, but for her, it was still difficult. And the worst part was knowing that no matter how much she was in love, a part of her still wondered how long this could last before the differences between their worlds became unbearable. Then Daniel made the invitation that would change everything. "I want to spend a weekend with you," he said as they sat on a park bench after Abigail's shift. She raised her eyebrows. "What do you mean?" "I have a country house, a bit away from the city. It's a quiet place where I like to go to escape the hustle and bustle. I want you to come with me." Abigail's heart raced. "Daniel, I don't know." He took her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. "No pressure. I just want us to have some time together, away from all of this, just the two of us." She bit her lip, hesitant. Daniel smiled. "What's wrong? Are you afraid to be alone with me?" She laughed, shaking her head. "No, it's just, I've never done anything like this before." Daniel leaned in, leaving a soft kiss on her temple. "Then let me show you how good it can be." And that's how, on Friday afternoon, Abigail found herself in Daniel's car, watching the city fade behind them as they headed toward the countryside. The journey was smooth. They talked about simple things, laughed at random jokes, and listened to music on the radio. Abigail liked how easy it was to be with Daniel when they were alone, without the gazes of the world around them. When they arrived at the house, Abigail was impressed. It wasn't an extravagant mansion as she had imagined, but rather an elegant and cozy retreat, surrounded by tall trees and a stunning view of the mountains. "Wow," she murmured, getting out of the car. Daniel smiled. "Did you like it?" "It's beautiful." He took the bags from the trunk and winked at her. "Then come on. I want to show you everything." The house was spacious and welcoming, with a fireplace, leather sofas, and huge windows that let the late afternoon light in. Abigail wandered through the space enchanted, while Daniel watched her with an amused smile. "You look like a child exploring an amusement park," she laughed. "And I really do. This is all so different from what I'm used to." Daniel moved closer, gently touching her face. "I hope it's a good experience." Abigail felt a shiver run through her skin with his touch. "I think it will be." That night, after a light dinner and a few glasses of wine, they sat on the porch, admiring the starry sky. The conversation flowed naturally, and Abigail felt more relaxed than ever. Until Daniel touched her hand and pulled her closer. She looked at him, feeling her breath catch in her throat. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He just held her chin between his fingers and kissed her. But that kiss was different. It wasn't just a sweet touch or a tender gesture. There was desire there. There was urgency. Abigail felt her body respond automatically, her hands sliding over his shoulders as she completely surrendered to that moment. Daniel pulled her onto his lap, deepening the kiss, his hands exploring her skin with intensity. The warmth of his body contrasted with the cool night breeze, making her skin tingle. She had never felt anything like this before. Every touch from Daniel awakened something new in her, something that made her want more. When he slid his lips to her neck, Abigail gasped, her hands gripping his hair. Daniel paused for a moment, looking at her with eyes full of desire. "Tell me to stop if you don't want this." Abigail took a deep breath, her heart pounding, but the only thing she could do was pull him back to her, capturing his lips with hers. That night, in that retreat far from the world, Abigail realized that she was completely surrendered, and that there was no turning back. The sun was slowly rising behind the mountains, tinging the sky with golden and orange hues. Abigail woke up to the soft light flooding the room, feeling the warmth of Daniel's body beside her. She was still trying to process the previous night, the whirlwind of sensations, his touch on her skin, the way their bodies fit together in perfect harmony. She slowly turned, finding Daniel sleeping peacefully beside her. His chest was rising and falling in a calm rhythm, and his arm was still wrapped around Abigail's waist, as if he didn't want to let her go, even in his dreams. Her heart tightened. What was she doing? She was allowing herself to be swept away by something that seemed too perfect. But she knew that reality didn't work like that. Daniel was a man used to a world where everything came easily, where money solved any problem. But she came from daily battles, from difficulties that he would never fully understand. But at the same time, Daniel made her feel special in a way that no one ever had. She got out of bed slowly, grabbing one of his shirts that was thrown on the armchair and putting it on before walking to the balcony of the room. The fresh morning air made her close her eyes for a moment, trying to find answers for the chaos in her mind. It didn't take long for her to feel Daniel behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, hugging her from behind and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Did you run away from me early?" he murmured, his voice rough from sleep. Abigail smiled faintly, but her gaze remained fixed on the horizon. "I just needed to think a little." Daniel was silent for a moment before asking, "About what?" She took a deep breath. About us. His body tensed for a moment, and then he turned her to face him, holding her face gently. What exactly is scaring you, Abigail? She bit her lower lip, averting her gaze. I don't know if I can fit into your world. Daniel let out a sigh and gently ran his thumb across her face. You don't need to fit in. I don't want you to change for me. But what about you? Abigail finally looked him in the eye. Are you willing to step out of your world to enter mine? Daniel watched her for a moment, and she saw something different in his eyes. He wasn't trying to convince her. He wasn't promising fairy tales. He was truly thinking about it. If being with you means living in a way that I'm not used to, then I am willing, he said, his voice full of sincerity. Abigail felt a knot in her throat. You say that now, Daniel. But what about in a month, in a year? He held her hands, squeezing them lightly. I don't know what will happen in the future, but I know I don't want to give you up now. She closed her eyes, feeling her chest tighten. I'm just afraid that in the end, I will be the only one who loses everything. Daniel moved even closer, his lips brushing against her forehead before whispering, And what if you gain everything, Abigail? She had no answer to that. But for the first time, she thought that maybe it was worth trying to find out. The following days were different. Abigail felt torn between fear and the desire to believe that Daniel could really be a part of her life. He continued to be present, respected her space, but didn't give up on her. Every gesture of his, every word showed that he wasn't just enchanted, he wanted something real, but doubt still haunted her. She was at the restaurant, organizing the tables before opening, when Ava approached her, holding her phone. Did you see this? Abigail furrowed her brow and took the device. What she saw made her stomach turn. A headline emblazoned a gossip. Website, Daniel, the construction magnate and his mysterious waitress, unlikely romance or fleeting adventure. There were photos of them at the charity dinner, captures of the moment when Daniel held her hand, and worse still, a click of the kiss they shared on the street. My God, Abigail murmured, feeling her heart race. She started reading the comments. She must be after his money. How long until he realizes this makes no sense? I bet it's just fun for him. Abigail felt a knot in her throat. Everything she feared was there, exposed to the world. It was no longer about stolen glances or subtle comments. Now everyone had an opinion about them. It was at that moment that she made a decision. She could no longer run away. That night, Abigail took a bus to Daniel's mansion. The imposing gate and well-kept gardens seemed like a barrier between them. But she could no longer hide. When the security guard recognized her, he let her in without questioning. Her heart hammered with every step. As soon as she reached the front door, she had no time to ring the bell. The door opened and Daniel was there, as if he already knew she would come. His eyes softened upon seeing her. Abigail. She took a deep breath. I saw the news. Daniel ran his hand through his hair, visibly irritated. I was going to tell you. I tried to control it, but there wasn't enough time. I didn't come here for that, she interrupted him. He looked at her, confused. Abigail swallowed hard. I came because I realized I was wrong. Daniel furrowed his brow. Wrong about what? She stepped forward, her heart beating fast. About us. Daniel fell silent. Abigail took a deep breath and continued. I spent all this time trying to convince myself that our worlds were incompatible, that everything was against us. But the truth is that I was scared to believe that something so good could be real. Daniel held her face with both hands, his eyes intense. You're here now. Does that mean you've decided to believe? She nodded, feeling tears welling in her eyes. It means I want to try. Daniel smiled and then, without hesitation, kissed her. This time there was no fear, only certainty. Days turned into weeks, and Abigail and Daniel learned to face challenges together. The media continued to speculate, but they didn't let it shake them. Abigail gradually got used to Daniel's social circle, never losing her essence. And Daniel, in turn, discovered that the little things, like a simple coffee at the end of the day or a stroll without luxury, could be the most valuable beside her. Their love was not perfect, but it was real, and that was all that mattered. The restaurant where it all began was still the same. The smell of fresh coffee and homemade food continued to fill the environment, and Abigail still loved to feel the familiar warmth of that place. But now, things were different. She was no longer just the waitress who took orders and cleaned tables. With Daniel's support and a lot of her own effort, Abigail was able to realize a dream she didn't even know she had. She became a partner at the restaurant alongside Caleb, expanding the business and transforming it into a cozy and high-quality space. And Daniel, well, he was still by her side as he promised. That afternoon, while closing the cash register, Abigail felt strong arms wrapping around her from behind. "How is the most beautiful businesswoman in this city?" Daniel whispered in her ear. She laughed, turning to him. "Exaggerated." "Realist?" he corrected, kissing her forehead. Abigail smiled and put her arms around his neck. "Do you still think our worlds don't match?" Daniel asked, teasing her. She looked into his eyes and responded with a certainty she didn't have before. "I think we created our own world." Daniel smiled before kissing her. And there, in that small restaurant where it all began, Abigail knew she didn't need to run away anymore. She had finally found her place. If this story touched your heart, we want to know your opinion. Leave a comment telling us what you thought of this exciting romance. Do you believe that love can overcome any barrier? Share this story with someone special and help more people be moved. And if you are not yet part of our community, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories full of emotion and unforgettable twists. We look forward to seeing you in the next chapter.